Hence, I decided the easiest way, since I am a very bad typist and note taker, is to use this wonderful flip video that we've been using to get across some of my thoughts. One of the most interesting things over the last couple of days, and this is September 28th, 2012. I had never listened before, but I have listened to Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. I actually listened to it twice, and I wrote out the text of it, only because I think it's important to read certain parts of it, because it was truly one of the most inspirational speeches I think that was ever given in the United States. With that, let me read certain parts, so we're using his words, not anyone else's. This was given on August the 28th, 1963, from the I Have a Dream speech. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American, whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the pursuit, to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. I'll just go to some specific phrases that I feel are so totally relevant today. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to generate into physical violence. Again and again we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new military which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. I have a dream that one day the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will be judged by the color of their skin, not by the color of their skin, but by the contents of their character. I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream every hill and mountain shall be made low, rough places will be made plain, the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and the flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we'll be able to hew out a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jagging discords of our nation into a symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, pray together, struggle together, go to jail together, stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, freedom ring from the mountains of New York and the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, God Almighty, we are free at last. Having never truly read nor heard or really concentrated on the speech, it was very enlightening to read it, especially this is almost 50 years ago. I think it's very interesting periodically to look back and ponder, to do almost a report card of the what was stated in Reverend King's address and where things have really turned out. And a report card after 50 years to a very great extent when we look back to what he had said was happening. Segregation to the greatest extent has been eliminated. Voter rights have been guaranteed. Equal rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're not judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. What demonstrates all of these? I think to a great extent we look what has happened in our political society, that Supreme Court, black Supreme Court justices, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense. But the most important, when we really look back, 50 years ago when Martin Luther King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial requesting that America give right and justice to the Negro and the Negro slave, to bring him out of where he was. The fact that today in the United States of America we have a president of the United States who is half black and half white. I think this is the greatest testament to the United States, that we have come out. Have we come all the way? No. And I think that is part of many of the statements, especially those that were relating to coming into, to me, one of the clearest phrases that still exists today is the island of poverty amongst an ocean of material prosperity. And that still exists today. There is an island of poverty for both black and white in the United States, in an entire ocean of material prosperity. But at the same time, over the last 50 years, there has been a path that poor have used, both black, white, yellow, brown, all races in the United States have used in order to move from that island of poverty to the ocean of material prosperity. The idea that there was, as expressed by Martin Luther King, the vaults of opportunity, the blank check that was not, has not been cashed. Have to look for the specifics. In the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. The America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds, but we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. And I say, from 50 years ago, it showed that. The hundreds of billions of dollars since then, since that day in August of 1963, that has been moved into the poor of the United States, of all races. The billions of dollars for housing, education, business development, Medicaid, welfare, food stamps, retraining, just the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been invested. And it has been rewarding for so many, but for so many there is still that island of poverty. Why is that? And that's why, that's our whole point with regard to our mission, bring Christ back into Christmas. Moral values. And when Martin Luther King was introduced that day, it was stated that he was the moral leader of our nation when he was introduced just prior to giving his speech. Martin Luther King, the moral leader of our nation, and the values that he inspired that all of Americans have, black, white, poor, rich. That same exists today, but the values, that is why our country is broken. We have truly lost our moral compass. We do not have a moral, where is the moral leaders of our nation today, with everything that is being done to truly destroy the unit of the family. If there is any one single item or factor that has caused our moral decay, it is the loss of the moral fabric of the family. Compared to, I think, 50 years ago, the fabric was the family, the mom and dad with the children and taking care of the children. The biggest disappointment I see when I look as to what is causing so much of the stress and pain in today's society is the total breakup of the fabric of our family. And until the fabric of the family is brought back, how can we go? The idea that, and I like to say, women, you know, you do a wonderful job, step aside. But to the men of America, America will never be defeated from without. No one will defeat America from without. but we will be destroyed from within if we continue to destroy our country from within. And the way that that's being destroyed is the complete desolation of our family unit. How can we continue to bring children into this world day after day after day and then totally abandon them? It is not, first, it is totally not fair to those that we create, that you then totally abandon them, and mainly to the mother. Frequently these mothers have many children by different fathers in both the white and the black community. How is this fair to the woman? We talk about respect and responsibility and right and wrong, the 3 R's that we need to reestablish in society today. Where is the respect for the women of our society if they are used just as sex objects to have babies by 4 or 5 different men, and the men just go off and do their merry thing? Oh, please, I'm going to have a baby, but my neighbors, will you please take care of my children? Will you educate my children? Make sure you feed them. Give them a good home. I'm going to find my next woman. If we don't change that attitude, our country is gone. So this is the thrust of our national campaign to bring Christ back into Christmas. We must bring moral values back into the United States. In order to do this, the track that we are trying to run on is that we have from the very practical standpoint, we have the ChristWreath. It is something that it is felt will be the symbol, the new Christmas symbol of, starting in 2012, of the value of the family, the first Christian family. It was from the birth of Jesus to Mary and Joseph that the first Christian family was formed. It is from that family that all the values that we've received, and I'm sure that Martin Luther King, as a pastor, and his belief in God, the values that he wanted passed down through that family, through his 4 children, through their children, through their grandchildren, not just to be set aside and thrown to others to take the responsibility for. So that is our mission. And what we intend to do is, by using the ChristWreath and the fact that we do have a design patent and there would be royalties, it is felt that millions and millions and millions of people will place the ChristWreath on their door, will purchase the ChristWreath. With that being done, millions of dollars in royalties are possible. We have created a foundation. We want the vast majority of the royalties that we receive to go into this foundation. It is from this foundation that we must identify clearly what and how we can move from a island of poverty to a sea of prosperity. Our thought is to specifically, and without government's help, put forth this challenge, that we will create a path for an individual. We must have a path to run on. If we do not make a definition of what a good, effective, wholesome, successful life is, which truly encompasses respect, responsibility, and righteousness in all of its contexts, until we can truly write down and stipulate that if you want to be successful citizens of the United States, this is a path that you should choose. You will understand what these values are. You will understand what responsibilities are. But at the same time, we must be able to extend to everyone a true understanding of where do we go from there. And if there are no jobs, we can want to be right and just and responsible, but we now have to have an economic path. Now that economic path is jobs. If we use the premise that there are millions of wreaths to be bought, therefore there are millions of wreaths to be made. If there are millions of wreaths to be made, we must have a manufacturing plant. Therefore, our goal is, with the royalties that we will have in the First Christian Family Foundation, we will start a business of wreath making. This could be done in various locations throughout the United States, because if this is to be the new Christmas symbol, we don't need one wreath, we need 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 50 million. The fact that we have a patent, a design patent, the United States Patent and Trademark Office extends to the ChristWreath, a patent of protection. We will look for the United States to protect that patent. By that patent, we can keep China out. We can manufacture in the USA. If we need to make 10, 20, 30, 50, there's 200 million Christians. How many would place a round wreath on their door? And some of the other items that will come to be as a symbol of the first Christian family. How many will purchase those items? Therefore, we need to manufacture them. Therefore, in states, many locations, there could be factories. We will use money from the foundation, from the royalties. There will be the demand for the jobs. We will create the jobs. They will be entry-level jobs. Individuals will learn how to work, what is required of work. The other thing that must then be done in the United States is there must be a war for jobs. We're not going to do it just on wreaths. But why have we sent all of the jobs in America over to foreign countries? All of the jobs necessary are not high technical jobs, but they're very skilled jobs. Why not bring back, why do we place ourselves with the potential of how our world is today, especially right now in September and October of 2012, with our foreign diplomats being killed overseas. We and the problem with Iran and nuclear power, the problem with China, our dependency on other parts of the world at a time when the world is in total chaos does not make sense. It would make sense if we are definitely much more independent and can take care of ourselves. Why not take 50 of the products that the United States will need for its own existence if we do wind up in serious either Cold War or real war throughout the world again? Why don't we have all of those jobs over here? Why don't we in every state look at jobs that went overseas in each particular state, find out what would be necessary to bring those jobs back, for the U.S. government to do whatever is necessary, because from a tax standpoint and a job standpoint, it is only through private industry that tax money is created to support the public sector. The public sector, military, fire, police, teachers, state and local workers, they are all paid from tax dollars. Where do tax dollars come from? I was using in one article that was a little opinion letter to the editor, the big bucket theory. We have over here this giant bucket, and this is where all of the tax money gets placed to pay all of the public sector employees. The tax money only gets in there from over here, which is the private sector. Private industry is the only thing that creates jobs. From those jobs, money is paid. From that, taxes are paid by both the business and all of the employees. That tax money comes from private industry, and all of that tax money goes into the giant bucket. It is then from that giant bucket that everyone else gets paid. Yes, taxes are paid from that bucket by everyone in the public sector, but the money that they are paying back in as taxes only came into that giant bucket from private industry. So isn't it essential that the bigger the private industry is, the more taxes that they will have to pay and put into that bucket, so that more can be used for those that are things that are necessary for the public sector. All of these jobs that went overseas, tax money now no longer went into the giant bucket. Employees came from being employed in the private sector to being over here taking money, or money coming out of that giant bucket to take care of them while they're unemployed. Until we bring those jobs back, this is getting bigger, this is getting smaller, and there's not enough tax money here to get in here to pay everyone here. So it's essential that we get more money in there. All businesses that went overseas, as soon as they come back, two things happen. Industry starts, taxes get paid, that money goes into the giant bucket. Employees who were over here on unemployment come out of unemployment. That means there's no longer money coming out of the bucket to them. They move over here into the private sector. In the private sector now, they are producing goods and services. They are paying taxes. This money goes into the bucket. So we have fewer people receiving services, more tax money in, so the tax money that's there can better be used for the services that are really essential. Point being, we must have a war for jobs. If now, in almost October 1st of 2012, in the heat of the election time, probably the most important election we'll have, I know, in my lifetime. Why is there not a war for jobs now? Let it go forth from both parties that as of next week, we're declaring a war on jobs, a war for jobs. Let us get the best minds there are to gather and state by state determine how can we best create jobs. Then, in working with government, get rid of the loopholes so that proper taxes are there. Get rid of the favoritism, and let's bring jobs back to America state by state, so that every state will bring jobs back, correct their problems in their state. And then the more industry that there is for those coming through just entering the workforce, they can enter jobs at low skill levels, improve their lot in life through education, training, and move into higher paying jobs. But this will only happen if we do bring more jobs back to the United States. This should be started today. It should not be, and it shouldn't be a question of, well, what are you going to do? Each party should put forth their specifics as to how they can create a war for jobs. The other thing that they should do starting tomorrow is to send a word back to the legislature. If ever things don't make sense, government certainly knows how to validate it. We're at a point in our society today and our fiscal responsibility today where we're on a fiscal cliff, we're ready to go bankrupt. And what does our government do? In the end of August, beginning of September, it takes a 6-week vacation. Where is the business logic of anyone to do that? The Congress and the Senate was hired to work for the people, not to take 6 weeks vacation when we're faced with a total disaster. Starting tomorrow, they should go back and create a budget. As important, screaming for the last 5 years about the tax code. Why has there not been a group already formed to revamp the tax code? Don't just yell about high taxes and taxing the rich and taxing the poor, etc. Revamp the entire tax code You've been arguing about it. Everyone talks about it for the last 3 years. Do it. So revamp the tax code now. Create a budget now so that it's ready for January the 20th when a new president will take over. And immediately create a war for jobs. Get the best people in this country to come forth with ideas of how we can bring jobs back to America, create jobs, create taxes, pay off our debt. Thank you. I will take a short break.